elected state House member behind me. I've tackled taking on the NRA with some reasonable, sensible gun safety legislation. So next session is going to be a pretty tough budget session, there's no doubt. But next to that, redistricting will be probably the biggest thing that we face. Next session will be my 5th redistricting. My first redistricting session, I was one of those 51 Democrats that went to Ardmore, Oklahoma, fighting against Republicans on their unjust map for Travis County. In 2011, I sued Rick Perry and the Republicans. I took them all the way to the Supreme Court because they chopped up Travis County into 5 congressional districts. Although I was not successful, the United States Supreme Court ruled against us, but it was worth the fight. As a Latino senator, I want to fight for fair and just representation. That's what I want to do. I think now more than ever, we need proven progressive leaders who will stand up and fight for working families and small businesses.
Thank you, Eddie.
Thank you.
All right, and Judge Eckhardt, could you give us your 2-minute opening, please?
Sure thing. I'm Sarah Eckhardt. Many of you know me, and I know you, and you all know the quality of my work. I am running for the state Senate because I have learned a tremendous amount in my 22 years working at the local level as a lawyer, as a prosecutor, as an attorney for the county attorney's office, as a commissioner, and as the county judge. What I have learned in these 22 years about collaborative leadership, about stewardship and representing the state, often with unfunded mandates, being both a policymaker and a practitioner, charged with bringing programs to the people of Travis County, and in Senate District 14 to Travis County and Bastrop County. It's going to be important to have a 365-day leader who is aware of how these bills play out in real time on the ground. So I have learned from you all what it's like and how effective it is to reach across the aisle, to reach across jurisdictions, to reach across geographic boundaries, and to stay at the table and make progress. We don't always agree at first, but through commitment and staying at the table and not getting up until the job is done, we have made real progress in Central Texas. I can't say the same about the Texas legislature, and most specifically about the state Senate. I would like to take some of that progressive, collaborative leadership to that chamber because I think that the people of Senate District 14 are tired of seeing their representatives come together every other year and fight. And they would rather see their representatives work 365 days of the year to get things done for Senate District 14.
Thank you both for your openings. So I'll repeat the first question again, and this goes to Representative Rodriguez. We're going to start with the simple question of what is your top legislative priority?
That's my one top legislative priority, is that right?
You can name a couple. Doesn't have to be one.
I think COVID has changed things up a little bit for me. I mean, public education's always been an important priority for me, but really criminal justice reform is a top of my list right now. And I think we definitely have to take this opportunity next session to address that. And there is momentum. I'm talking to my colleagues, there's momentum there. We need more police accountability. We need the discretionary arrest for fine only traffic fine to traffic offenses and things like that doesn't lead to an arrest. We need to eliminate deadly force where all possible. And I want to keep on working next session to decriminalize marijuana. The other thing that this pandemic has shown me is how porous our social safety net is. And I think we might have an opportunity to do some things, definitely discuss very seriously and productively expanding Medicaid. I want to make some of the waivers permanent that the governor had put up there as it pertains to CHIP when it comes to copay. Okay.
Time is up.
Thanks.
Judge Eckhardt, 30-second rebuttal.
No, I'm sorry. Only if there's a rebuttal needed.
I'm sorry, Rich. Did I make so? This is kind of a
1-minute answer.
So she gets the same question. Thank you.
1-minute answer. Thank you.
And would you mind restating the question?
No problem. What are your top legislative priorities?
My top legislative priorities really are have to be dictated by the facts on the ground. And the facts on the ground right now are the economic and health recovery from COVID-19, as well as criminal justice reform in light of what we have seen rocking our entire country over the last several weeks. So with regard to COVID-19, COVID-19 did not create these problems, but it certainly has amplified the issues that we have in both healthcare and a disparity of opportunity in Texas. So the first order of business in the Texas legislature is going to be responding to COVID-19, both as a healthcare issue and as an economic issue, and making sure that we have health opportunities and economic opportunities spread to the people who most need them. We cannot recover our health without recovering our economy, and we cannot recover our economy without recovering our health. Also, the criminal justice reform issues have been
Thumbs up. Thank you.
Wow. Okay, thank you, Hayden.
Okay, number two, Representative Rodriguez, how will you accomplish your legislative priorities in the Senate where the Republican majority doesn't need your vote to move their agenda forward?
Unmute.
Is that
Sorry, I didn't mean to do that. I think that's a great question. I think relationships are really important. And I don't suggest that being in the legislature as a House member for 18 years automatically qualifies me to be the next senator for SD 14. But the experience right now with the budget that we have and the and redistricting coming up, those relationships are going to be really important. And I have good relationships with Republicans and Democrats. In fact, I've served in the House with half of the senators that are in the Senate today currently, both Republican and Democrat, some of whom I actually came up with. I mean, I actually came to the legislature with 18 years ago. So those don't guarantee that I'm going to be able to get everything I want, but it certainly is a good starting point to have a dialogue and discussion, meaningful, and we're working more collaboratively with the senators, because I know every one of them, but I've also developed long-standing relationships with just about all of them.
Thank you.
the question is with regard to effectiveness and bipartisanship?
Unmute yourself, Leslie.
Sorry. In a Senate where the Republican majority doesn't need your vote to move their agenda forward, how will you accomplish your legislative priorities?
I have worked in bipartisan circumstances and actually in majority Republican circumstances in numerous instances as a county commissioner and as a county judge. I was the chair of the Conference of Urban Counties, which is a predominantly Republican organization, as well as the vice chair of CAMPO and also on its leadership executive committee for most of my time there, as well as being the chair of the Clean Air Coalition over 10 counties, which are predominantly Republican and rural. The way I got to those positions was by playing fair, playing hard, working hard, and earning people's respect. When you tell people where you stand and you ask them where they stand and genuinely look for common ground and show them that you will work hard to help them in that common ground, that's how you move things forward. It's not just about being friends. It's about showing the work and making it clear that you are valuable to them in showing the work.
Perfect, 1 minute.
Thank you. All right, question number 3. Representative Rodriguez, what role can state government have in assisting local and special governments in implementing policing reforms? What would you champion?
I think some of the things that we really need to do is, other than some of the stuff that I mentioned before, we really need to have a state law that prohibits the hiring of an officer who is fired or resigns while he or she is being investigated for a use of force during an arrest. We need to make that statewide. Also, I think we can really use a statewide database where all local law enforcement will provide information on stops, arrests, and any kind of issue of force, and that goes to the database with demographic information, because that's what we need, is to know who's being pulled over and who's being potentially hurt or even killed, and that information is made public, and we need to do that as well. I think we need to do a ban on chokeholds and knee holds. I know that the House passed something recently that has some of that in there. We'll see what the Senate does, but if assuming that, let's assume that maybe that doesn't pass, then I will champion that in the Senate.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Could you restate the question?
Sure, Judge. What role can state government have in assisting local and special governments in implementing policing reforms, and what would you champion?
Thanks. I very much appreciate the representative's work before George Floyd's murder in pushing forward decriminalization of marijuana. That is an important issue for which I am in 100% agreement. But true criminal justice reform requires so much more. I have 3 things that we must implement right away that I've been working on for some time in my years as a prosecutor and moving forward. To shift police funding to education and healthcare, to demilitarize and defederalize our local law enforcement, because local law enforcement should be about community policing, not immigration and federal drug enforcement. And third, to require independent investigations of police wrongdoing. We cannot expect the police to investigate themselves, and we should not expect local prosecutors who work with police every day to be able to prosecute them without conflict. So we really do need to make sure that we hone in on all 3 of those, as well as the 8 can't wait list of
Time is up.
Thank you.
All right, moving on to number 4, Representative Rodriguez. Despite changes last legislative session, Austin residents located within the Austin Independent School District still pay high property taxes because of our state school finance system. In fiscal year 2020, an estimated 43% of the AISD property tax collected will go to the state for redistribution. What are the thoughts on if the formula should change, and if you think it should change, how?
Yeah, the formula should change to really reflect the needs of AISD, for example. The state formula does not take into account the number of children that qualify for free reduced lunch and breakfast. That needs to be taken into consideration. Property values are high does not mean that our children that are going to public schools live with a family that has a lot of means. So we need to kind of pair that up. The real answer is for the state to fund public education more directly and more robustly, because that is what is going on. That is why the locals have had to pay so much more. Property values being what they are, that's a very long discussion I would love to have with you guys in person sometime soon. But that's what the answer is: more state funding and rearranging the formula so they more accurately reflect the work on the ground that is going on in our district.
Okay.
Could you restate it?
Yes. Number 4, it's despite changes in the last legislative session, Austin residents located within AISD school district still pay high property taxes because of our state school finance system. In fiscal year 2020, an estimated 43% of the AISD property tax collected will go to the state for redistribution. What are your thoughts on if the formula should change, and if so, how?
The formula absolutely has to change, but first what has to change is the Texas legislature, excuse my language here, but the state legislature needs to put on its big girl panties and actually take a look at sustained revenue sources for public education. Public education is one of the deliverables under the Texas Constitution that is the responsibility of the state of Texas. But because we are banned from having a statewide income tax or a statewide property tax, the state has pushed more and more of its responsibilities off onto local property taxes, and then villainized those who made the hard decisions to find a sustained revenue source. So I would certainly change the formula. Currently, we managed to pull the state's chin up over the bar of just barely over 40% of funding for statewide education. That formula should be more like 60%. And we plugged that hole with one-time dollars that started eroding the day the bill was passed. You cannot have ongoing funding. You can't have funding for ongoing needs.
We're going to go ahead and, because we're out on time, finish those questions. I mean, that's the last of those questions, Leslie. And if we can go ahead and move into 1 minute closings.
All right.
And I understand everybody would love to hear questions, so many more. But.
You can go ahead with your closing, Representative.
Oh, thank you. Well, just being experienced doesn't qualify me for this. I know that. I acknowledge that. But I'm a proven effective progressive legislator. I have been for 18 years. You cannot pass a bill as a Democrat in the minority, as I've been, without having Republican support. It's just not possible. And now more than ever, we need proven progressive leadership. I believe that with redistricting and with the budget looming, my experience will be very helpful to the district and to my constituents, which is what this is all about. It's not about Sarah or me, it's about the people of Senate District 14. And that's why I'm running, and that's why I believe I'm best qualified. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Judge Eckhardt, can you give us your 1 minute closing, please?
Sure thing. You all know me and you know how I work. I work hard, I work fair, and I work honest. And I will win bipartisan support for good, solid government through my work ethic. I will earn respect and I will earn partnership. It will not be about getting along to go along. It will be about being able to provide real solutions to our very real problems. I will not be an every other year representative. I will work for you 365 days of the year. And when we're not in session, I will be looking at every bill that affects our region to see how it played out on the ground. And if it needs to be adjusted, I will find a way to adjust it. And I very much look forward to doing that work for you.
Thank you both so much. I appreciate your patience with my learning to be a moderator.
It's hard. It's really hard to be a moderator. I've been doing it for 5 years on the commissioner's court, and whoa.
Well, there's 3 dogs right there, so that doesn't.
You did a great job considering the animal distraction there. Yeah, I saw that.
Thanks.
Appreciate you all. Thank you so much. Thank you, Leslie, for being the moderator. Thank you, Judge. Thank you, State Rep, for being with us today. We hope you're able to get some rest. We definitely don't hold you to stay on the call with us. And so
thank you.
Get out there and do the stuff that you need to do for Texas and for Austin. Thank you.
Thanks,
and
Rich.
so for
Guys.
Our next moderator, this is for Travis County Attorney race. So Laurie, Eiserloh, and Delia Garza, or Mayor Pro Tem Delia Garza. And Lynn Kurth is our moderator. And Lynn, where are you?
I'm over here in the
There
right-hand
you are.
corner.
Perfect. And so, just remember what the rules are. You got 2 minutes for the opening statement. You have 1 minute for the response to the questions, 30 seconds for rebuttal if needed, and then 1 minute closing. And so the same thing, as soon as we start getting close toward the end, I want to make sure you all have time for your closing statements. I'll try to get myself in there. In the meantime, then Hodem is going to keep everybody on task for the time for the questions. Lynn, it's all yours.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for being here. So Rich's special spinner thing that he did pulled up Laurie first. She'll go first and answer the question first. And then Laurie will be last to do her 1 minute close. So this is a long first question. You guys might want to take notes, but here we go. Currently, the county attorney's office has identified the following strategic goals.
Introduction,
Oh,
2 minutes.
Thank you. Thank
Yes,
you,
ma'am.
Hassan. Yes, I'm sorry. And that would be Laurie first.
Hang on. Okay, tell me when you're ready for me to go, Lynn, okay?
3, 2, 1, go.
Good evening, you all. The year was 1992, and I was a recent graduate of UT Law School and the director of the Lesbian and Gay Rights Lobby of Texas. Times were terrible for the gay community then. Death was rampant, AIDS funding was inadequate, and Texas criminal law specifically discriminated against us. That year, the Republican National Convention was in Houston, and my friends and I peacefully marched on the Astrodome demanding AIDS funding. As we approached, men in bandanas pulled down the barricades and set them on fire. We didn't know them. In response, the police turned on us, peaceful protesters, with horses, clubs, and tear gas. I was not badly hurt, but the scene was shocking, and I wondered, how will things ever change? But change they did, and I'm proud to have been part of those changes. Better AIDS funding, reform of criminal laws, and same-sex marriage. Now look, I'm not a professional politician, but I am a lawyer with 27 years of frontline experience at the state, city, and county level who wants to be your next county attorney. Why? Because I know what that office has done and what it can do to fight for our Travis County values. It's 240 proud legal professionals, both civil and criminal side. Here's the reform we need. We've got to have some police accountability. We need a prosecutor between the police and the door of the jail to push back and reject charges where there's evidence of bias. We need true mental health diversion. The jail cannot be the mental hospital of last resort. And we must fight for resources so victims of domestic violence are safe and have their day in court. Because of my specific plans for reform, I've been endorsed by most of the Democratic Party clubs, including the Black Austin Democrats and NAACP President Nelson Linder. I've been endorsed by Latino leaders such as Gonzalo Barrientos and Margaret Gomez. I've been endorsed by the Statesman and the Chronicle. Look, y'all, the county attorney's office is a law office. My opponent has represented her district well, but has only practiced law for about 3 years. I'm an experienced trial attorney who's practiced at the state, city, and county level.
Thank you. Time is up. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Delia?
Hi, good evening. Thank you for this opportunity. I'm Mayor Pro Tem Delia Garza. I'm the first Latina elected to the Austin City Council. I'm the first Latina to serve as Mayor Pro Tem. I'm the first attorney in my family. Before my time on the Austin City Council, I was an Assistant Attorney General in the Child Support Division of the AG's office. Prior to that, I was an Austin firefighter and a union leader in the Austin Fire Association. As a council member, I have prioritized equity issues, affordable housing, and criminal justice reform, not just for my district, but for the entire city, the 11th largest in the country. My public policy experience, my public safety experience, prior to, I believe I said I was a firefighter, my public safety experience, my recent and relevant experience working on equity issues, I believe has me best suited to tackle some of the difficult decisions and issues this office will face. Anybody that tells you that policy experience is not important in this job either does not know what policy is, does not know what the job of the county attorney is, or is just not being straight with you. Because any criminal justice reform plan is a policy plan. I want to continue doing this work to specifically address racial disparities in our criminal justice system because it is unacceptable that African Americans make up about 8% of this county, but sometimes make up over 30% of the jail population in this county. We cannot change outcomes unless we change systems. And my criminal justice reform experience and my community work is why I have earned endorsements by people and leaders like Chaz Moore, the executive director of the Austin Justice Coalition. Right now, more than ever, we need leaders with experience leading because meaningful elected work is not easy. And I know that firsthand, and I'm doing that every day for the past 6 years. I'm committed to the work of addressing inequities in our community and would be honored to have your support.
Thank you both. So this question, I'll read it. If you want to take notes, because it's long, that's fine. Currently, the county attorney's office has identified the following strategic goals. 1, full implementation to ensure compliance and justice under the Michael Morton Act. Facilitate greater communication and collaboration among community justice stakeholders to achieve efficiencies and improvements, and provide superior civil legal services to meet statutory obligations and client needs. And the question is, if you are elected county attorney, will your strategic goals differ? And if so, how? And Laurie, please.
So I agree with these goals. I do think it's incredibly important that we have the full implementation of the Michael Morton Act. And you all, this is a complex issue, but basically this is really where we are making sure that all the evidence is before juries when they're making their decision, and that nothing is hidden from our jury decision makers, right? So it really is the keystone of police accountability and pushing back where there's cops who've lied in the past or hidden evidence. Those cops should never testify. I think that's key. I do think collaboration is important. I think that's why I've gotten so many endorsements. In creating my 13-point criminal justice reform plan, I have been specifically collaborating with community leaders all across town, which is why I've gotten so many endorsements here. I do think that's important. And of course, Superior Legal Services, look, we are the attorneys for the commissioners. They don't have to hire us if they don't want to. So it's important that we provide quality legal services and we're the first ones they turn to. Otherwise, you know who's going to be caught holding the bill? You taxpayers. If they're not happy with the legal services, they don't have to hire us. So,
Thank you.
sorry, go ahead.
Thank you.
Hard.
Delia?
With regards to, if I remember the question, because it was long, the Michael Morton ad was intended to stop wrongful convictions. I didn't hear, I don't think I heard specifically about addressing racial disparities, and that would be a priority of mine. There has also been significant, tough on crime type of policies, and those have shown to not really work. We need to be investing more in mental health programs and diversion programs. And declining charges, a priority would be declining charges that largely affect our brown and Black community. And you may have said it in your question, but I didn't hear those. And so that's where I would change things. Absolutely, wrongful convictions, we need to stop, but we need to make sure that we're also declining charges that largely affect the brown and Black community. And we see those disparities significantly in our jail population. Like I said, the 8% African-American population with making up over 30% of the jail population. I think it's important to do an audit of all the policies of this office to look at implicit bias and issues that we might not realize are having a large effect on the prosecution of our Black and brown community. Time's up. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Okay, Laurie will go first. Second question.
Do I have a rebuttal on that, or do I have a 30-second rebuttal?
If you need one, you can have 30 seconds.
Yeah, thank you. One of the keystones of my 13-point criminal justice reform plan is to put an experienced prosecutor between the door of the jail and the police. And one thing that will do is will allow the county attorney's office up front in a way that doesn't violate the United States Constitution to push back where there's evidence of police bias. And that will help both the African-American and Hispanic community or anyone in marginalized circumstances. And I think it's absolutely key that we do that. And I would look at that. Thank you.
I'd like to take my 30 seconds then as well. One thing my opponent likes to point out is she says I've only had 3 years of practicing, which is incorrect. And I think has tried to minimize my policy experience, and her 13-point plan is a policy. And I do have experience in that area in not only writing it and implement it, but working with communities to make sure that we are taking their voices into account, specifically our Black and brown community.
Great, thank you. Question 2, first to Laurie. The county attorney, when representing Travis County elected officials, may have to take legal action against the city of Austin and or the state of Texas. Can you give an example of a past legal action, and what would you do to protect the county's interests?
Well, a past legal action that we took against the city of Austin, of course, is that our office prosecuted the city council for an open government violation. They were utilizing roaming quorums, and that made it difficult for citizens to get in front of the city council and hear how they were making their decisions. We are going to be very strict on open government. We've also, as you know, we've sued the state of Texas and been sued by the state of Texas, defending Sheriff Sally Hernandez's principal views and position on immigration warrants. And I would be, if the opportunity presents, willing to take those again. I actually have sued Greg Abbott. I've been one of the attorneys on those cases, and I'm ready to sue Greg Abbott again, if that's what it takes to protect our Travis County values.
Delia, would you like me to repeat this question?
Yeah. Yes, please.
Okay. The county attorney, when representing Travis County elected officials, may have to take legal action against the city of Austin and or the state of Texas. Can you give an example of a past legal action, and what would you do to protect the county's interest?
Sure. I think this is an area where the county can be more active in filing lawsuits, in filing voter suppression lawsuits, by our Attorney General, who consistently does things to, in my opinion, suppress the vote for people, who fights mail-in ballots. Other examples that other counties have done is file lawsuits for price gouging for medication in insulin cases, for example. And so I think there's so much more that this office can be doing. I also want to point out that I was not part of the council that the county sued or charged with criminal action when it came to walking quorums. Our council has been very careful about that because of that past incident. But I think there's a lot more that this office can be doing in defending and fighting against voter suppression and things like price gouging of medication that other counties have done.
Great.
I have a rebuttal.
Okay.
So the county attorney's office is civil and criminal. So the drivers on a lot of the lawsuits, such as price gouging or insulin or voter suppression for that matter, that policy is set by the Commissioner's Court. We're the attorneys on that. So we are working in collaboration with them. Now there's a recent example where the county attorney jumped in front of the county commissioners, and that was in Williamson County. And they ended up hiring outside counsel to handle all of their civil matters. Or to handle their civil matters. So it is key that we keep in mind the role of the county attorney's office on the civil side.
And I'll use my 30 seconds, and I think that's the perfect example of why it's a problem to have a candidate from the status quo that has these rules. Because nothing stops the county attorney from going to the county commissioners and telling them why it's important to have this kind of lawsuits. And that's why it's important to have people with elected experience and the courage and the passion to push the envelope and to get the county to do things that maybe they haven't done before, but it's important to do, like fighting back against voter suppression, like fighting back against price gouging. Thank you.
Thank you both. Next question, first to Laurie. Under the current fiscal year 2020 budget for the county attorney's office, the budget was increased by $109,000-ish to process a backlog of an estimated 14,000 evidence files to be in compliance with the Michael Morton Act. Do you know the status of the backlog? How would you address and prevent future backlogs?
I do know the status of the backlog, and really what this was about were APD videos, body cam, and also dash cam. There were a lot more videos than there have been, but the police, which my opponent is over the city council, of course, did not have the staff to handle all of those videos. So they became extremely backlogged, which made it impossible for the county attorney's office to review and reject charges, in fact, or even look at any type of resisting arrest because we could not get our hands on the videos. So the Commissioner's Court increased the budget by $110,000 to put workers on there so that we could get through all those videos, which we have done. The backlog has now been taken care of, and we are able to move those videos much more quickly within a matter of a day or two. And that was resolved in March of this year. So that's my answer to that.
Can you repeat the question?
Yes. The bit about the budget and the I'll skip that. Is that cool? Mm-hmm. And the meat of the question is, do you know the status of the backlog, and how would you address and prevent future backlogs?
I don't know the status of the backlog, but I think addressing backlogs is about proper budgeting, maybe not having to go to the Commissioner's Court, because you actually have your own budget under the county attorney. That does get approved by the county Commissioner's Court. But I think that's where my broad experience over this job, which is mostly an administrator's job, comes into play here. As city council members, we approve a $4 billion budget. And there are and this will be my 6th year going into a $4 billion budget. I don't believe my opponent has any experience residing over a budget that large. And that's where we can make changes. And we're getting a huge call right now about police reform and how we reallocate resources and make sure we're investing in mental health and community policing. And I believe that that's where my experience helps in areas like this, is when addressing backlogs, is you have to find the money and you have to set priorities. We did it with the DNA, the rape kits in Austin. We found that there was a backlog and we addressed it in the very next budget. Thank you.
Great.
We're going to.
I want to rebuttal on that, guys. Of course, I'm sorry. You all, the backlog was caused because the city did not budget for all the extra video information evidence that was coming in. The county had to take up the slack. You all, I hear what my opponent is saying about she thinks it's an administrator's job. I work in the county attorney's office. There is no way that you can review and direct all those attorneys if you really don't, if you just have very limited number of years practicing law. 3 or 4 years is not going to cut it. That would be someone coming in at kind of a low intermediate level position. And to run this office, you need some experience.
All right, Laurie, time's up.
Thank you.
Delia.
I would say it depends. You know, I'm not the status quo candidate. I'm the non-traditional candidate, definitely. And I think it depends on what you think experience, where it matters the most. In leadership, in policy, every decision that the county attorney makes is a policy decision. It is a decision on whether to do something, frankly, or not. We're not changing the laws when we go into this job. We're changing how we apply those different kinds of laws.
Okay, we're going to, Lynn, let's go ahead and move into closing.
Okay. All right. We'll do a 1-minute closing each. And Delia, you'll go first, please.
Sure. Thank you. So thank you for this opportunity. The results of the March 3rd election showed I overwhelmingly won every precinct for the almost majority, every precinct east of 35. This is the area where most of our Black and Brown community live, and this is the area most affected by the criminal justice system. But I can't win this unless I win more precincts west of I-35, and it's a sad reality. In this moment when we are being called to trust our Black and Brown community, I humbly ask for your support. I also want to name my endorsements. I've been endorsed by Mayor Adler, Councilmember Kassar, Flanagan, Renteria, Harper Madison, state representatives in Hosa, Israel, Rodriguez, Cole. All these people are familiar with my work fighting for working families. I've been endorsed by Education Austin, over 3,000 public school teachers, Unite Here, the Austin EMS Association, Workers Defense Fund, LEUNA, the Central Texas Building Trades, because they know my broad experience fighting for families, fighting for reform, and producing better outcomes, and I would be honored to have your support.
Thank you. Laurie?
Thank you. I appreciate the time to talk with you all this evening. This is an incredibly important race. David Escamilla, the current county attorney, is leaving this office in good hands if I'm elected. You all, I am not a professional politician. You know, my mom was a widow and a school teacher. I'm the only lawyer in my family, and here I am running for county attorney. Why? Because I believe in the excellence of that office. I have seen it on a daily basis, what that office can do and what it's capable of doing and the reform it can do. No one was more shocked than I was to lead in that primary, in that runoff. You all, I have been a reformer since I stepped out of law school, and I'm going to be ready to fight for Travis County values on day one in collaboration with my colleagues and with the stakeholders in Austin. I have honestly so many endorsements, I cannot list them all. I have more small supporters than all the rest of the people in this race combined.
Time is up.
Please look at my website. Thank you.
Okay, thank you both very much.
Thank you.
All right, thanks everybody, really appreciate it. And again, appreciate your service, and you know, you're not expected to stay on the call. We understand that you need to get your rest, reach out to voters, or do the work that you all are doing, but you're welcome to. So thanks again. The next race, which is our final race for this evening, is the Travis County District Attorney's race. District Attorney Margaret Moore and Jose Garza. It will be moderated by Darius Terrell. Thank you so much, Darius. I even think I called you Daryl earlier. I mixed your first and last name together. If I did, sorry, maybe just my mind. But with that, you all know the rules at this point. And Darius, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mr. President. I do not know who goes first, but I'd like to give them their introduction.
Oh, thank you. So when we did the wheel, Jose Garza came up. So he goes first.
Okay, thank you, candidates. Mr. Garza, your 2-minute introduction.
Good evening. My name is Jose Garza, and I'm running to be your district attorney because right here in Travis County, our criminal justice system is broken. Over the last several weeks, we have seen millions of people take to the streets because they are rightfully outraged about the violence that they have seen committed against Black and brown people by the police. Right here in Travis County, right here in the most progressive county in the state, people of color are injured and killed every single year by police. Over the last 4 years, our district attorney's office has not held a single police officer accountable for misconduct. Over the last 4 years, our district attorney's office has not convicted a single police officer for injuring or killing a person of color. But it doesn't have to be this way. I started my career on the Texas-Mexico border, working as a public defender, both at the state and the federal level. And in that job, I saw every single day the way our criminal justice system weighs most heavily on working class people and people of color. I also served in the Obama administration, and it has been the pleasure of my career to lead Workers' Defense Project here in town. And in those jobs, I have seen the power that regular people have, the power that we have seen over the last 2 weeks in communities across the country and right here in our backyard, that people have to change their community and to change their broken criminal justice system. The time to reimagine our criminal justice system is now. I hope you will join our movement. Visit to learn more about where I stand on the issues at Jose for DA, and help us reimagine our criminal justice system. The time is now.
Oh, perfect. Wow.
Yeah, thank you. Ms. Moore, your introduction.
Is she on the call?
Oh, sorry.
There you
There you are.
There you go. Now start over.
Yes, your opening statement, please.
I want to talk to you about our accomplishments because this has been a tough time. And the DA's office has been working hard on many fronts. But right now, on our front and center on our minds are the horrible examples we've seen of police misconduct across this country. And indeed, today, we have seen publicly a case we've been working on. I started as district attorney with a goal in mind, a top goal of creating a civil rights unit that would comport with the highest standards that we saw across the country. I recruited an eminent African-American attorney who had both prosecution and defense experience and was teaching about this subject. When I recruited him and begged him to come work for us, shared my vision with him, and together we worked in this community to come up with a civil rights unit and a process that would build the confidence of the community, founded upon the principles of justice, fairness, and transparency. And we have done that. My opponent would dismantle that and discontinue the hard work we've accomplished. And here's something I want to talk to you about because I think it's extremely important. We have actually prosecuted police officers. He tells you we haven't held anyone accountable. That's not true. We've returned indictments. We've secured surrenders of licenses. We have handled these cases. And in those instances of lethal conduct where we decline these cases, you can go online on my website and read a lengthy exposition on what the facts were, what the witnesses said, what the reports showed, what the evidence was, and the legal analysis applying Texas law to the incident. And I'm proud of that. And you know why?
Time is up. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for those opening statements. Again, we're going to start simply. First question to Mr. Garza. What do you believe is the most significant issue in this race?
Well, as I've said, our criminal justice system is fundamentally broken. And I want to tell you a little bit about what I seek to dismantle. I seek to dismantle the fact that here in Travis County, 9% of our population is Black, but over 25% of the population of our jail is Black. I seek to dismantle the fact that every day in Travis County, over 70% of people sitting in our jail have not been convicted of a crime. The overwhelming majority are sitting there because they can't afford to pay bail. I seek to dismantle the fact that every year our district attorney's office brings more drug cases than any other kind of case, while at the same time not securing a single conviction for a police officer who was injured or killed a person of color, for at the same time losing the trust of survivors in our community. I seek to build a criminal justice system where we lift up working people and people of color instead of locking them up.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Moore, what do you believe is the most significant issue in this race?
It's experience. Mr. Garza has zero experience as a prosecutor. Do you see any prosecutor across the country telling you these cases are easy to prosecute or easy to obtain convictions? Of course not. They're very difficult. And I have excellent attorneys who are pursuing these cases every single day. And we have obtained justice according to the law. And most important, we have fashioned this civil rights unit listening to the voices of our minority community. There are people who sit on my civil rights advisory committee that you know, that you trust. Nelson Linder, Gary Bledsoe, Joe Parker, Ashton Cumberbatch, Mimi Stiles, Chaz Moore. These are people who were consulted every step of the way and who saw what we were building here and who come to the meetings and grade our papers on every single case. And what they told me consistently throughout that process was, listen to us. You don't tell us how to do this, we'll tell you. And we're going to do it.
Okay.
I'm going to, if I may have my 30 seconds for rebuttal.
Yes, 30 seconds.
I want to talk a little bit about experience, because for the last 400 years in this country, we have been electing career prosecutors to be our district attorney. And what we have seen in the last 400 years and what we see today is a lot of talk about reform and not a lot of change. And so I think it is time to fundamentally reimagine and rethink the job of the prosecutor and who we should elect as prosecutor.
And my 30 seconds is, we have accomplished these things in Travis County. We have eliminated cash bail to the extent that Texas law and the safety community permits, with standing orders and the reforms we put into place. We have changed the way we handle these sexual assault cases. We have changed the way we've handled domestic violence cases. We've handled the way we do victim outreach. We've changed the way we handle officer-involved cases. We are accomplishing reform every single day, and it's because I do have experience.
Okay, question 2 first goes to Ms. Moore, and it is, do you believe that the current process is helping female sexual assault, physical abuse, or stalking victims navigate the workings of the justice system? Why or why not? How can it be improved?
I'm sorry, would you, I couldn't hear the current what?
Okay, Mr. President, is it okay if I share my screen?
I'm sorry, I just couldn't quite, the current.
Okay, do you believe that the current process is helping female sexual assault, physical abuse, or stalking victims navigate the workings of the justice system?
We have improved that a great deal. We now have a much more robust staffing of, we've created an adult sexual assault unit that has dedicated victim witness counselors. We put into place victim outreach policies for prosecutors to interview the victims. We work very closely with the victim counselors that staff the law enforcement agencies, the sheriff's office, the APD, UTPD, et cetera, et cetera. We have almost every single law enforcement agency engaged in this process. And we have a domestic violence unit that we didn't have before with dedicated and trained victim outreach people. So I believe that we have made great strides, adding more resources and adding more training and adding more sensitivity to how we interact with victims. And it is paid off in many ways in the trials that we've held directly with these victims.
Mr. Garza, do I need to repeat?
No, absolutely not. Every year here in Travis County, thousands of women, thousands of victims of sexual assault go without justice. And we can tell that it's not working because our district attorney left the statewide task force on sexual assault, because our district attorney left the SART, a collaboration between survivors and victims that had been working for years. It is time to take a victim-centered approach to these offenses, to install simple and common sense changes, like making sure that victims have the opportunity to speak face-to-face with prosecutors. We have a long way to go in this area.
Thank you. Next question goes first to you. The Civil Rights Unit was created in 2017 by DA Moore in addressing community concerns involving the use of unlawful force by police officers and to promote transparency. We realize that every officer involved shooting goes through this process. Currently, the website reflects 25 declination of prosecution letters, 8 shootings still under investigation that go back to March 2018, and no information relating to prosecutions. Is this process working, and what would you change, if anything?
It's absolutely not working. Before my opponent's term, the practice was for every case to be taken to the grand jury so that we can eliminate bias from this system and make sure that you, the people, get to decide when enough is enough. And that process makes sense because no one who is on the ballot on July 14th has taken more money from the police union than my opponent. It is not possible to believe that that process is unbiased. And so there are so many changes we need to make. First of all, we need to take all of these cases to the grand jury so that you can decide. And we need to be moving these cases much more quickly. We have got to make these cases a priority. It's what people have been demanding over the last couple of weeks out in the streets. And it's time for us to get into the 21st century on these practices.
Okay.
All right, I want to go back to why I changed this process and decided not to take every case to a grand jury. And the reason is that when a case goes to the grand jury, it is cloaked in grand jury secrecy. And all of the facts and all of the evidence are not revealed to the public. Do you know how many indictments were returned before I got there? And like the 8 years before, 1. That case was removed to federal court and the officer was granted immunity. He never even got to trial. We decided to change that. And I want to stress how important to me this transparency issue is, because if you can't get the facts and understand the process underlying what the disposition of that case, then you cannot judge whether justice is done. And I want to emphasize again that I went to the community and talked through this process with leaders you trust, with leaders you listen to, and trust and listen to, and they have not asked for this change.
Okay, thank you. Next question is to you first, Ms. Moore. The last 2 weeks have again highlighted the institutional racism with people of color face in our United States justice system. Just some of the challenges range from excessive enforcement in majority neighborhoods, receiving fair sentencing and access to diversion programs, or being on the receiving end of a police abuse. Looking forward, what are some of the social justice reforms that you plan to take if reelected or elected?
I started at the very beginning of my term by commissioning a study of to detect whether there was racial disparity in the disposition of low-level drug cases. Based upon that study, the recommendation was to look upstream from booking because that's where the disparate impact was taking place. I am right now working with a community-based program to deflect minority arrestees out of the system without even being booked on drug cases and other state jail felonies eventually. I have been able to talk to the police department and get to the point where we are ready to start implementing this program. We've applied for a grant to fund it, and I have pledged $100,000 of forfeited property money as seed money to get this thing started. We analyze all of our cases.
Time is up.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Garza, do I need to repeat?
No, that's okay. So look, as I mentioned, right here in Travis County, right now, 9% of the population, 9% of our population is Black, but over 25% of the population of our jail is Black. The majority of women every year who are survivors of sexual assault are women of color. We don't need a study to tell us what we see with our own eyes every day in our communities. And so what we need to do, we need to start by ending the prosecution of low-level drug offenses here in Travis County. The evidence is overwhelmingly clear that every day a person struggling with substance use stays in jail, the likelihood they commit another crime goes up, and they are one of the greatest drivers of racial disparities in our criminal justice system.
Okay, thank you. Next question to you first, Mr. Garza. Do you believe that there is an over-reliance on incarceration in our country? Please explain your position.
For the last 40 years, if not longer, we have been sold a bill of goods. We have been told that what public safety is locking up as many brown and Black people and working people as we can. That if we just lock up enough brown and Black people, that will make us safe. But we know that that's not true. We know that what public safety is a good job. We know that what public safety is a good school. It's quality healthcare. Good public safety is stability. And so it is time to begin to take steps that prioritize what we know will keep us safe. And again, that means ending the prosecution of low-level drug offenses. That means taking seriously police-involved shootings and violence by police. It means taking seriously sexual assault cases. It means deprioritizing low-level drug offenses. It means ending cash bail. That is the role that our district attorney could be playing.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Moore, do you believe that there is an over-reliance on incarceration in our country?
I believe that's our history, yes. But I do know this, the history in Travis County, since I became involved in the 70s as an assistant DA, has been to emphasize alternatives to incarceration. And we continue that today. That's why I started diversion as county attorney in 1981 for misdemeanors and alternatives to prosecution back then. And I was following the lead of Ronnie Earl. We still today emphasize anything but our incarceration first, second, third, or fourth. We do it with our juveniles and we do it in our courtrooms today. Where I can tell you is the emphasis in our office is on violent crime. And in those cases, we look at incarceration because we know our juries incarcerate when there is violence to persons. And we see heavy sentences there, and that gives me the guide that a prosecutor needs from the community to know how we should handle these cases.
Mr. Terrell, if I may, during the course of my opponent's term, she has convicted and locked up thousands of people for low-level drug offenses. As I said, every single year, the #1 case our district attorney's office brings are drug cases. We know that in 2018, there were 2,700 drug cases and 70 sexual assault cases. It's time to realign those priorities.
Ms. Moore?
Well, my answer to that is that Mr. Garza has no idea the underlying reasons for that. The arrests are made by the police. I heard Laurie Eiserloh talk about being able to decline cases. I have been pressing for that. I want to be able to decline cases. I am now engaged in discussions with the police department about how can we staff these cases so they're not direct filed and we get a chance to review them. we have diverted out of the district courts thousands of low-level drug cases. They are felonies, but they are being handled as misdemeanors.
Time is
So
up.
we are de-emphasizing drug cases.
Thank you. Mr. President, do we have time for another question?
Let's go ahead and just move to closing statement.
Okay, thank you. Let's see, who goes first?
That would be, sorry,
Ms. Moore.
DA Moore. Thank you.
Thank you. I have come back to be the district attorney because I wanted to build an office that you could be proud of. And we have done that. It just so happens at the same time I came back, there was a national movement that got launched. And I totally identify with the aims and objectives of that national movement that Mr. Garza represents. But what I think is important for Travis County voters to consider is when and how are the means that the national movement is insisting upon relevant to the ends in Travis County. He has no knowledge of how our system works. He thinks the DA does things the DA cannot do. He makes promises he cannot deliver. But I will tell you this, I know how to collaborate and work with the judges, court administration, the commissioner's court, the sheriff's office, other law enforcement agencies to bring about real changes. And we have done that.
Time
We
is
have
up.
redirected
Mr. Garza?
hyper support.
I want to talk a little bit about the local movement that has brought us to this place, to the tens of thousands of people who have been marching in the streets right here in Travis County, who have been decrying the violence that happens right here in Travis County, who have been decrying the racial disparities that exist right here in Travis County. On Election Day on March 3rd, I was proud to win the endorsement of over 80,000 voters. The biggest, largest local movement in this race on that day. And I have seen all across the state and all across the country, progressive district attorneys making changes that our district attorney will not. It is time for Travis County to lead. It is time for Travis County to reimagine our criminal justice system. And I would love to have your support to do that.
Thank you both for your participation. Mr. President?
Yeah, thank you, Darius. Really appreciate you moderating tonight's forum on this particular race. And thank you, everybody, for joining us. I'm a little hoarse, but I'm going to get through this last part, and which is what's next. And that is, the electronic ballots are going to be sent out to members. If you have any questions, it should go to Emily, and then you're right, send it to the full board as well, if there's any particular issues. But those will go out on Wednesday, June 10th. This Friday at 10 p.m. Central Time is when electronic voting will close. Candidates will be notified on Saturday. Membership and public will be notified on Sunday. So that's what you need to expect, and I appreciate it. And thank you all for being here. And it is 8:10. We are adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you, Rich. Thanks,
Thank
everybody.
you. Great work.
Thanks, everybody.
Great to see you.
Bye. Good job, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Especially
Good
our-
job, Rich. Good job,
Especially our candidates. We know how hard it is. I know how hard it is. And so the stress of it, and do appreciate all the work that you all are doing.
Great job.
Yeah, good job.
All right. Thank you.
Look at all those pretty faces. Bye, everybody.
Bye. Bye, Laurie.
Disappeared.
Bye, Delia.
Great job. Bye, bye, bye.
Bye.
I'm going to see you. I'm a good host. I'm going to see y'all out the door. Have a good night, everybody. Hi, Beth. Hi, Doug. Joseph, how are you doing? Thank you for being here. All right, bye, everybody.